would like to call the Flint Board of Education Special Board Workshop meeting to order at 5:32 p.m. Board members, as I call your name, please reply present for the public record. Diana Wright.
Present.
Betty Ramsdell.
Present.
Danielle Green.
Present.
Carol McIntosh. Vera Perry.
Present.
Blake Strozier.
Present.
Okay. Board members absent, Carol McIntosh.
Thank you.
At this time, the board will hear any comments from the public. Public members that have joined our meeting remotely are able to submit their questions through this question section or may send an email prior to the meeting. Members of the public are reminded that the Board of Education, by its bylaw 1370, are not obligated to answer questions, make statements, or commitments in response to issues raised by the public. In general, such issues will be referred to the superintendent for investigation, study, or recommendation. At this time, I'll ask Stephen if there are any comments from the public.
Good evening. There are currently no questions and there were none submitted to the email.
The community is reminded that they may submit their questions by email to fboe@flintschools.org to have their questions read at the next meeting. Thank you. I now turn the floor over to our interim superintendent steward to advise us of the structure for tonight's workshop and introduce our special guests from Johnson Controls.
Good afternoon, everyone. So a couple weeks ago, myself, Ms. Sikelski, and Rachel met with Johnson Controls, and Johnson Controls shared some extremely important information that we thought should be presented to the board. And so Johnson Controls is going to make a presentation to you sharing that same information that he shared with the three of us. And so now I'm going to defer it to Dan Mack to share the information that he shared with the team.
Good evening, President Lester and members of the board, Ms. Stewart. So yeah, we had a couple of different iterations of what was to be done at Northwestern High School at the time, if you recall. I'll go through a presentation. It will kind of drive you through what we've done there and what was intended to be done as that building was to be laid up, you know, mothballed for lack of a better term. But now that it is intended to be more occupied, we wanted to share with you some of the primarily HVAC and controls concerns, the learning environment concerns that need to be addressed to provide that learning environment for the kids. So I apologize, I don't use GoToMeeting a lot. We use other types of media, so I'm going to try to get the presentation online. Let me know if it and when it's up.
You're good to go.
Okay, fantastic. I also have Herb Cavendish. He's the lead of our mechanical group, and he probably knows this building better than anyone else on the planet, given the amount of time that he spent there as a base for the work that we've done at the other schools, as well as last summer trying
Mr.
to...
Mack, I think you're muted. For some reason, it stopped coming through on my side.
Okay.
I can hear it.
I can hear everything he's saying.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so can I.
Casey, are you muted in some way?
Actually, now I can't hear anybody. Can anybody hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes. Yes, we can hear you.
I promise I didn't do that. Should I continue, or do we want to wait to get Mr. Lester's sound back?
We're good now. We're good.
Okay,
We're good.
fantastic.
I can hear you. I don't know what happened.
Okay.
Fantastic. So Herb is going to go through some of the more gory details of what needs to be done at that particular facility. And really, it's a lot of the same types of things that we did at your other schools. And some of that will be kind of sprinkled throughout here. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Any questions before we get started? Anything you want me to focus on more?
I think if you
Okay.
just focus on the things that Carrie may have asked you to focus on, I think that will help to answer any questions that they have. Once you finish presenting, we are going to have a Q&A session where the board will have an opportunity to ask you some questions.
Okay, fantastic. And then I guess, Monica, when we're done with this, if you could get me back to where I can see everyone, because I'm not sure how to do that.
Absolutely.
All right, so thank you so much. So this is a review of the work that we've done at Northwestern. So this was really done at most of the schools in Northwestern. The scope was to upgrade the controls and refurbish the mechanical equipment in the area of the central kitchen. Now, we began that work before central kitchen moved. So that was the focus of the actual updates that we did at this building. So largely the facility is still old equipment, and we'll get into that. But basically we upgraded the building automation controls for the kitchen, and actually it was requested that we add on the gym and locker rooms. And so we upgraded the pneumatic controls and the digital controls. So now you can see those areas on the network, but the rest of the facility you cannot see on the controls network because the old controls still remain. So some of the older equipment, digital equipment on the left, the old pneumatic or air equipment on the right, and this is what it looks like now. So rather than having all of the old abandoned equipment kind of still hanging on the wall, not knowing what's viable, what's not, what functions, what doesn't, you can't see it from, admin building or any other building. Now that area is fully functional. And you can see all the buildings on the network. So this is what we've done at the other schools, which needs to happen at Northwestern. When building automation equipment doesn't work, when mechanical equipment doesn't work, you don't control the learning environment. So this was a logger that we had put in that showed, and this was pretty typical of most of the schools before we started last year, was that the classroom environment was very hot in the summertime as well as the wintertime. This is a wintertime event here, and now the schools that we've completed are maintained at about 70 degrees. You don't have that at Northwestern. So as far as the air handlers, what we did, I'm going to have Herb go through the details, and we won't read through each one of these, but just kind of getting an idea of the things that we had to do to make air handlers that appear on the top to look like, brand new air handlers that appear on that bottom picture. So, Herb.
All right, my name's Herb Cavendish. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
So going through the air handlers that we did this past summer, the goal was to get the air handlers reconditioned and as close to new as physically possible and mechanically possible. By doing that, the units that did perform pre-vibration analysis on those to find out what was wrong with them. However, a lot of the equipment did not function when we got there, so that couldn't be done. So what we would do is go through and identify all of the issues with the piece of equipment. We'd go through and make the repairs, and then perform after vibration to make sure the bearings and balance of the blower wheel, everything was in specs. So by doing that, we repaired any of the physical components of the units by patching metal, removing rusty metal, putting in new, cleaning the units, painting them, along with all the mechanical internals in it. If it needed a new shaft, it got a new shaft. New bearings, it got new bearings. Blower wheels, it would get a new blower wheel. There was a number of units that also did not have filter racks on them. Currently, we fabricated new filter racks and have the air being filtered now to protect against unnecessary maintenance of cleaning coils and stuff like that. All the coils were cleaned, tested. If the coil was damaged beyond repair, it was removed and replaced. So the piece of equipment is back to as new a condition as you can possibly get. At Northwestern, these are some before and after pictures of the equipment we worked on there. There was the cafeteria unit, the gym units, and locker room units. And you can see in the pictures of what the existing condition versus how we left it. So the unit got all new controls upgraded on it. The pneumatic, it still has pneumatic actuation that the digital control controls. All the pneumatic actuation is functioning properly now, and the units are performing as they were designed to perform.
So these are the units that we actually touched at Northwestern. So that's the good news. Now the rest of the building.
So the remainder of the building at Northwestern is in very poor condition. These pictures are some examples of areas that are going to fail. The top left picture is of a control valve that is no longer functioning properly to deliver to the air handler. The top right picture is a hole actually all the way through the condensate return line, meaning your condensate's no longer making it back to your boiler system, which in turn means you're using extra makeup water. With the extra water you have to bring in, city water into the system means you have more chemical you're adding to it to protect your system. Bottom left is a picture of a pump. There used to be two base mount pumps on pads there that are kind of pieces of them still laying there. Another one's been put in it to function, and the piping coming off that is what you see on the bottom right. The piping coming off that is in real poor condition and could fail at any time. This particular system converts your steam to hot water, which delivers hot water to your perimeter heating in the building, plus the reheats in the classroom. And unfortunately, when this system runs, it's when it's cold out. And if this system fails in the middle of winter, it could create a lot of additional problems to the building with freezing coils, freezing units, freezing the building itself up, and a lot more costly repair.
Now, one thing I will mention before we move on, and I just remembered that Carrie had asked a question about whether the heating and cooling systems that need to be repaired affect the kitchen, and they do. These are the heating and cooling systems that supply the hot water and chill water to those air handlers that we refurbished.
Quick question.
Sure.
I was under the impression when they first did the renovations to Central Kitchen that those were going to be on the separate control panel. I actually asked that to Jeff Bennett, who was at the time the lead architect from THA, and he instructed us at the time that that was going to be one of the caveats to the Northwestern site, with that it was going to be pneumatic controls over the Central Kitchen area, so that we wouldn't be utilizing so much energy for the entire building per se, just that certain section if we were to close the building.
Yeah, and they are on us their own control system, but the hot water and chill water come from the boiler plant all the way at the other side of the building. So our original intent was to put a separate boiler in that mechanical room. But if you've got to use the rest of the building, then that no longer makes sense.
So because our plan shifted, we kind of went away from that plan, because I thought that was the initial. I mean, at the last time we actually had a discussion about closing the building. Well, and I'm not saying this is a discussion about closing the building, but at the last time we discussed it, I believe that was one of the items that we came away with, was that maybe having separate handlers, boiler systems, water intake and outtake, it would be better to have that set aside so that we wouldn't be utilizing so much and relying so much on older equipment that in some cases hasn't been reviewed, updated, or even looked at since 1964.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. So when the building became at least partially occupied, we were asked to get the central system working because that's the only way that those, I think there was started with one wing was occupied. That's the only way to heat that wing or cool that wing is to get the central system back up. So,
Right.
so that was the direction given to us was to try to evaluate these systems. And Herb got the cooling and the heating system kind of up last year, but it was difficult and a lot of babysitting and Band-Aids to try to get through the season. So that's not something that can be sustained.
Absolutely.
Yep. So you hit the nail on the head. That's exactly where we started out. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's just my architecture engineering mind coming forward. So that's
Okay.
all.
Yep, you're absolutely correct. Go ahead, Herb.
All right, so you want to go to next slide? So these are some pictures of the remaining equipment in the building. You can see by the top left, some of the existing air handlers that have not been touched yet have missing components to them, such as coils, piping, parts of the unit. Then on the bottom left is just another picture of another example of an air handler that needs to be gone through, controls updated, coils checked to get it functioning properly. The top right there, each classroom in the north and south wing and in east wing, the duct that feeds off the air handler to the classroom has a reheat coil, which the thermostat in the classroom controls. These coils, as you can see by the picture, are plugged up. There's real no means of access to them without removing ductwork. But they need to be removed, cleaned, tested, repaired, or replaced in order to get the proper airflow into the classrooms. That the air handler running doesn't necessarily in this type of system mean that you got good airflow and air quality going to the room itself because of the reheats are dirty and blocking that air. The bottom right picture is of a temporary coil we installed last year when we needed to get the chilled water running. That the unit that's in provides the airflow to the north classrooms, which was the largest area utilized by the middle school last year. And the coils on that unit have been frozen and broke. So, and they're very large coils. There was no means to get the coils at the time. What we were able to do is find some smaller coils, which we temporarily piped into the return ductwork to where we could get some cool air flowing for those areas. So the coils that are in the unit should be repaired or replaced with the right size coil so the unit functions properly. You get the design out of it of what it was intended for.
Yeah, I want to make sure that everyone understands that that temporary coil was one that we could actually find that was close enough to get temporary cooling. This is not indicative of the work, obviously, that we typically do, but this was in a pinch to get cooling to those classrooms because it was so hot. And the intent was not to use, originally that wing. So this is what we ended up doing. Obviously, they need to be properly gone through and replaced where necessary.
One disadvantage of the wing layout at Northwestern is the north wing and the south wing, both the perimeter is your hallway. So the classrooms don't even have the ability to open a window for fresh air. So when it did get warm and the building warmed up, there was no means of, opening a window for fresh air or putting a window unit, air conditioning unit in the classroom because the whole perimeter is the corridor. So that made it a little more challenging also. Here are some more pictures we're looking at of more mechanical stuff that needs attention there at Northwestern. The top left is the boiler feed system. The feed system here has been making up water for a long time through the condensate lack of returning, and the system is failing. The tank itself is failing. When we first arrived at Northwestern to start our work, it was still in heating mode. A bypass valve was open to keep enough water flow to the boilers, which in turn just had the tank overflowing, water dumping down the drain. This past fall, we did get that to where it was somewhat properly for fill, but the tank and the equipment on itself are failed. So that is one major piece of your heating system that will take out the entire building heat. Below that is a example of a condensate receiver. You've got a couple of these throughout the building. They bring the condensate from one wing to that receiver, then it's pumped back to that large boiler feed system. And they are in pretty rough condition. If you look at the picture just to the right of that, it's actually under the valve in the orange pipe there. There's actually a pump missing off of that one, and just a piece of tin clamped over it. So most of your condensate there is running out on the floor. And then the other top two pictures on the right are tunnel piping and some of the condition that the piping is in the tunnels. The bottom right is the boilers themselves. The boilers themselves, we did get functioning. There's a few things that need to be repaired on them. A good tear apart and clean, go through them, get everything functioning as it should, get the safeties and the controls back in order to where the boilers have then become reliable. There was a lot of babysitting when we turned the heat on to keep the boilers running. It seemed like just about every other day they were failing. They would go down. There was no means to know it unless the building started cooling off. We'd get a cold call there or come into that building that morning, find it was cool. We would go down and monkey with the boilers to get them going again. So by going through them and fixing the controls and the safeties, get them cleaned out, then make the boilers reliable so that you have a functioning source of heat there day in, day out, instead of not knowing when it's going to go down. Here are some examples of the existing pneumatic controls that are on the air handlers currently, and digital controls that oversee that. The digital controls there are pretty obsolete controls, and they do punch over the pneumatics through EPT, and the pneumatic controls are, for the most part, non-functional. And we did go through a few units that we were able to make stuff temporary functioning so that we could provide heat and cooling to the necessary areas. So the current scope of work there was the refurbished pneumatic controls for the kitchen, the gym units, and the locker room units. Then install digital controls that control over the pneumatic actuation. We refurbished air handler units. Originally, we looked at installing a separate boiler just to handle that area, and we were going to lay up the remainder of the facility. Because the facility stayed occupied and functioning, the separate boiler was not installed and the layup did not happen. So what we proposing to do is install, or the scope of change, we would install the new controls, refurbish the remaining air handlers in the building, clean and repair the heating coils that we talked about for the classrooms, the reheats. We'd replace that whole boiler feed station. We'd go through and replace the steam traps, The hot water pumps would be replaced, and the piping that is rotted out in conjunction with those in that area would be replaced. We're also looking at installing domestic hot water boilers. There's 2 different systems there now. Both are failing, kind of on their last leg. And we would look at refurbishing the chillers and associated piping. We know from what we found that the majority of the cooling coils have failed. They have been froze. We know that 2 of the 3 chillers I was able to get running, kind of know what we need to do with the other one. The actual circ pumps on the chillers need to be replaced. The system needs to be flushed and cleaned. We spent when we got the chiller system up and running last year, I had no idea it had been, I believe I was told, 5 years since it run. The condition of the system, the crud in the piping, we literally were pulling and cleaning strainers about every hour for the first 2 to 3 days. We got it to where we could then do them every few days, then weekly, and then, you know, we were checking them every couple of weeks. So the system has a lot of crud in it that can be flushed and chemically flushed. We did find with the cooling coils, going through that, we know the auditorium unit, the coils are failed, and we also found the steam coils in that unit are failed, and that unit also has failed bearings on it. And we know this from trying to get the auditorium working for some events they had last fall. So by going through the air handlers and the systems feeding them, you know, we can make them reliable, and we can improve, you know, on the air quality than what's being delivered now, and get it back to more what it was designed to work as, instead of just temporary things and babysitting.
So just to summarize, the work that needs to be done, really it's to do a couple things, and all these things kind of roll up into that last item, which is to greatly improve the learning environment, which has been done at your elementary schools. So just to provide a stable and controllable, you know, temperature atmosphere in the classrooms, reduce the emergency repairs. There's so much wrong with the equipment at these buildings. And Herb could walk you through one of them, and he could probably take 2 hours explaining the things that he found. Improving the air quality, obviously you saw the air handlers, some of them weren't running, you know, even if they were running, the reheat coils were plugged, a lot of the valves didn't work. And just providing reliable air conditioning for the balanced calendar. I mean, in some of the buildings that, you know, I think we were able to put air conditioning in, I think neither cut. The rest of the buildings very hot in the summertime when you're trying to start school. This one does have air conditioning, however, it does need some work to make it reliable and to get the temperatures down to a comfortable level. Utility costs, you know, you saw that graph where in the winter time your classrooms are 80, 85. We saw some that were 90. You know, that's energy that doesn't need to be used, right? So you're not only making it more comfortable, but more energy efficient. And then again, all these really get down to your scope of what you do, and that's provide a learning environment, you know, that's conducive to teaching these youngsters what they need to learn to move on in life, right? A couple of other notes, and this is the last slide. Energy savings were identified from laying up the building, which means it wouldn't have been utilized for the most part. Those will obviously not be achieved, but you will have energy savings over kind of the base case if you just ran the buildings as they are. This doesn't include pool work. No, it does include Herb looking at the pool units, the boilers, doing a condition A, which really means investigating, make sure that they're running. If there's anything majorly wrong with them, we go back and let you know. And of course, any pool structural work, it's not included. But the estimated costs for all of these improvements to get the rest of the building up to what we would call a livable standard is about $4 million. Now, there is work that we did not do at Northwestern that would reduce that amount. There's about $580,000 to be spent at that building that would not have to be spent now. That could go towards these improvements, which is basically the installation of a new boiler, laying up the rest of the building. Because you can tell by what Herb said, if you don't lay the building up properly, you get what you have, and that's frozen coils. I mean, those coils are huge, and each one of them has damage to it because the building wasn't laid up properly the first time. So that's our presentation on what needs to be done at Northwestern. I'm going to try to get the group back before we do questions so we can see each other.
Okay.
Thank you, Dan. President Lester, we'll turn it back over to you for a Q&A session with Johnson Control, and then we will dismiss Johnson Control and go into a brainstorming session.
Can I request that the last slide be put back up instead of this
Sure.
question?
Sure. I think I can do that. I'm going to lose everyone, I'm sure, but not that one. I know. That one, right?
Yes. Thank you so much.
Anita, are you going to do the roll call?
No, you,
Question?
sir. I'm going to turn it back over to you for the roll call for the Q&A with the board.
Okay. So we will start with Vice President Wright.
I have a couple questions. The first one is what was the work that would have been done for the $581,000? So I'm going to give you all my questions at once. And was any of the damage, or did the problems we had during the water crisis a contributing factor to a lot of the corrosion and stuff that I saw throughout the your presentation in the condition of the pipes and so forth? And so anyway, I think I have one other. I'm trying to look through my notes, but you can address those two for me.
Sure. I'm going to take the first one for the 580. It was installing a new boiler plant in that mechanical room that served and this is one piece of it, the cafeteria, the gym, and the lockers. And then the other side of it was basically taking the rest of the building and laying it up properly. So that's draining all the coils, which there are many coils, draining the boilers, the feed system, the condensate system, draining the chill water system. And I don't know, Herb, from a technical standpoint, there's a lot more that goes into it, but essentially laying up the remainder of the building and making that mechanical room for food service self-sustaining.
So
Yeah,
would
we were looking at keeping just the west wing that has the food service, the gymnasium, and the rest of the building was essentially going to be cut off. So not just the HVAC system, but domestic water, fire suppression water, so that the cold environment that the laid up section could see wouldn't freeze up any piping. But it was going to be done so in a way that, with adding chemicals to the boilers and stuff like that, that if it was ever brought back online, you wouldn't have the corrosion that we see now.
So the $581,000, that's already been taken into consideration with the $4 million cost.
No, that's a dollar amount that's kind of parked that you could use to reduce that $4 million if you indeed aren't going to do that work, which we estimate you're probably not if you're going to get the rest of the building out. It's more of a financing function.
Can I insert
That would be
something
like
here?
3.5 instead of 4.
Correct.
All right. So my second question was about the water crisis.
Right. Herb, I'm going to have you answer that question. I don't think so, but I want you as a technical person to answer that question.
It's tough to say. That would be a tough call to say whether it could have or not. I think there would have to be testing done to see what the actual crud in the piping is from. If it's just from oxidation, when you drain a system, you allow air into the pipe. When you allow the air into the pipe, then it tends to rust up and oxidize more. So whether or not the water crisis had played a factor on it, I wouldn't know without doing some testing and finding out what that stuff in the pipe actually is. And if it's just from oxidation, then no, it wouldn't have. But if they were to find something else, it could have.
Okay. And I just found my final question. When we talk about the nature of the needs at that building, is it something that we absolutely cannot start school with because of like almost you never know the moment it's going to all fall apart? Or I mean, how much time, is there a time factor that could be looked at in terms of how long we have before we absolutely have to do something? Or is it so immediate that we have to move like today?
What do you think, Herb? You had to babysit that building last year. You know it as well as anybody.
Well, for school starting back up, obviously it's going to be a cooling factor, and we could get it functioning like it was last year at this time. However, it's very unreliable, and it could get a catastrophic failure at any time, which we can't predict, but that would then take it out to where you would not be able to have air conditioning in the building. The building would just be hot. And then on the flip side, going into the fall, with the heating system, the steam side of the heating system, you can provide steam, and the boilers, they're reliable to a point, but there again, somebody needs to be checking on them. However, with the controls being down, you get what we had last year, very inconsistent temperatures, where you're going to have very hot areas and very cold areas. So not saying that it's impossible to function, but it will take a lot of doing to make it functional as a temporary situation.
I think the biggest concern I have with that building is the airflow issues. So you've got air handlers that just are not functioning at all. And then the ones that are, those coils are plugged up, so you're not getting a lot of air into the classroom, which is part of the reason why you have such hot and cold areas. So yeah, we don't have a crystal ball. You saw the equipment, it's in pretty bad shape. But my biggest concern really is airflow, especially given what we're going through right now, and potentially causing issues into the cooler season when, I don't know how this thing's going to work, but with the flu, you get summer off and then it goes right back into flu season when everybody's inside the buildings. They're not as outside as much. The temperatures aren't high enough to kill it. So I guess that would be my biggest concern.
All right. Thank you so much. Yes,
sure.
Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. President.
Okay, then we'll move on to Betty Ramsdell. Ms. Ramsdell, do you have any questions? We'll move on to Danielle Green.
Okay, I hear the word catastrophic used twice. Oh, go ahead, Casey. Let Betty go.
Okay, I worked in that building when it first opened, and I don't ever remember the cooling system working really well. I guess my concern is, so if we would have stayed with the original plan and put the rest of the building in mothballs, so to speak, we would be on track. We would be all right. And if
yes, for the heating side, I don't think it was intended to put air conditioning in that space.
all right, but if we, with your original plan, you said you would put something that would take care of, you could put a second piece in so the water wouldn't have to travel from one end of the building to the other.
Right, a new boiler plant in that particular mechanical room that serves those areas that that we spoke of, the kitchen, the
How much,
lockers in the gym.
how much would that cost? Or is that,
I'd have to break it all apart. I don't know what that is off the top of my head.
just a guesstimate? You know, 100,000, 50,000, 25. Does that sound reasonable?
I don't know. Our project manager's not on the call, so I don't want to throw a number out
That's fair.
because in my role, I don't deal with numbers a lot and I don't want to put the wrong expectation out there. But we can get back to you with that.
All right, that I would like to know that. But then,
Okay.
but if you mothballed the rest of the building, that would be all right. That would be okay. It wouldn't be of any danger. I guess, as you put it, one of the things that really concerns me is the airflow is poor. If anything in the air is poor, we have kids with asthma. We have all kinds of issues going on. And underlying health problems for not having the proper ventilation, et cetera, would really, really concern me about a safety issue with the students. And, you know, and I would never want a secret, but it certainly wouldn't be. I mean, I wouldn't try to cover up anything. But I just don't see that as a plus for the students, being in that kind of building, being that kind of environment. And if you were to choose to, and if we said do the other part to do it all, could it be done by time school started? If, say, we started on time.
That's a question. Are you talking about the putting the original plan back, putting the boiler system in by the?
No, now I'm talking about if you were to do all the repairs needed to be
Okay.
done, what's the length of time? What's your guesstimate on the length of time it would take to do that?
What do you say, Herb?
Well, it would be, it would have to be sections out. No, it could not all be done by the time school open, but the critical areas we would focus on would be the air handlers and getting proper airflow and air quality into the rooms along with cooling. And then, you know, school can come in while we're working on, you know, we can continue working on the heating side of things. So to make it safe and functioning, I believe, yes, if we were to start on it right away and work a lot of hours, we could get it safe and functioning. And that's if you're looking at the areas that you used in this past year, the north wing, the west wing, and in the central area where the office and the library and stuff was.
Okay.
The south and east wings will take a lot more work.
Okay, thank you. And if you could get us a price of what, if you just took care of the kitchen part, you did that addition, cool air, appreciate that at some point. Thank you.
So heating and cooling for that area?
But yes, whatever you think that it needs. I mean, you know, so just what you believe that it needs.
So just to be clear, so the original plan was to put a boiler plant in that area, mothball the rest of the building. So that was about 580,000, just so you have an idea. To add cooling, I'm not sure what that would be. That would be something in addition to that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
That's all for me. Casey?
Sorry, I always forget to unmute myself. Now we'll go back to Danielle Green. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's all right. The word catastrophic is being used a lot. So when I hear that, I'm thinking life loss, that type of stuff. So I just want some more explanation what the catastrophic exactly means. I understand that it'll be uncomfortable, which is not acceptable in my opinion also, but I want to know, are we risky? Because that flooding we just had in the parking lot, and I'm hearing about different water mains, and I'm not sure how that incorporates into what we're talking about. But what type of catastrophic things are we looking at if we don't get this done? I understand
So
the airflow, but catastrophic is that's a strong word.
when I talk catastrophic failure on a mechanical system, it
Mhm.
means the system will go completely down in school. The school will have to be closed. Not a life loss or nothing like that situation. The school will have to be closed. There will be no form of heat whatsoever, or you would have to close the building.
Oh, that's
I think
catastrophic. Okay.
the only caveat to that, Herb, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if someone was down in that mechanical room and one of those pipes on the heat exchanger busted,
Mhm.
what would happen there?
Oh, there could be, there could be serious problems. If you were in the room when a pipe failed, it could spray hot water, extremely hot water on you or something. Or if you're in a tunnel, it can make getting out of there. If you don't know the area, it could make getting out of the tunnel and stuff extremely difficult.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Also, just to piggyback off of what Mrs. Wright said about the corrosion in the pipes, I remember when I think I had first got on the board and we had our pipes tested or the water tested that ran through the pipes, and we were told that our pipes were fine and that we just needed to replace fountains which made no sense to me. During the time that was when Tawab was the superintendent, that absolutely made no sense to me. I didn't know how we got so lucky that our pipes weren't bad in any of our schools, is what, if I recall correctly, what we were told. So if that's true, which I don't believe it was, that means our pipes would not be corroded by anything in the city water. Does that make sense? Or is that
If that's the case, that the domestic water side was fine, then I wouldn't think it should have hurt the mechanical side of things. It is two different systems. You're bringing the city water in and chemically treating it for your boiler loop and your chiller loop. So if the piping and water that was coming in was fine at that time, maybe it did not have but we would not know that unless the mechanical side piping was tested.
Okay. And I think Mrs. Ramsdale kind of touched on my third question. I was going to ask about doing the work in phases, so we wouldn't have to come up with that 3.5 million all at one time. And I think that's kind of the question that Mrs. Ramsdale asked. And I think I wasn't clear, but if you could put a list of priorities together to see what the priority is in what area, whether it's heating and cooling or cooling, and break it down in the financials to see how much it costs for the priority sections of the building.
I think one piece that we would need to know is how the building is going to be utilized in the future. So in the fall, or when do you start school? Is it before fall this year? Whenever it starts, we need to know which wings.
We are scheduled to start. The students are tentatively scheduled to return to school the first week of August.
Okay, so we need to know, which wings, if all the wings, if one a wing, two wings, that'll help us because obviously we want to prioritize where the students are going to be learning, right? Versus where you may have empty spaces.
Okay. So is that something we can get to them so we can for me, that just helps me with, the information I need to decide what I think is best by way of my vote. So is that something we can get, Mrs. Stewart, or that's something that'll take more time?
I'm sorry, state your question again, Miss.
Is that something we can get? to Johnson's Control to see when they put a list together of the priority areas in the building? Because for me to make my vote, I need some more information. Okay. Okay.
So once Johnson Control gets the list of priorities, can I submit that to the board? Is that the understanding?
Well, the information he said that he needs from us to put that list together of priorities.
The occupancy
example.
pattern of the building, Anita, which wings are going to be occupied, if not all of them. That way we can prioritize those wings versus say all the
We
wings.
would not be changing anything. It would be the same as it was last school year.
Herb, are you clear on the areas that are occupied last school year? You walked that building probably 1,000 times.
It kept growing. It started with the north classroom wing, and then the central area, the office area, the library area, the room beside the library, then became the new cafeteria.
Yep.
And then on the west wing, it was originally time we knew the food services would be there, the gymnasium would be there, and the locker room. Well, I don't even think the locker rooms were really utilized. But then during the year, the music rooms, which are between the auditorium and the cafeteria or central kitchen, they ended up being utilized, and there is no HVAC to those areas. The air handler supplies that area will not run currently, and both the heating and cooling coils are broke in that unit. Then the south wing started getting some utilization. The theater group ended up occupying some of that. And then down the hallway, there was some rooms here and there. I'm not sure what they were occupied by, what groups or anything, whether it was to do with theater, whether it was to do with students, I'm not sure. But some rooms in the south wing started getting occupied. So, yeah, if it's what was intended on last year, as far as the classrooms on the north end of the building, the central area, and the food services and gymnasium, we could get that most likely going in time for school to come in. There's for those areas, there's 4 or 5 units that would need to be done ASAP. And then the chilled water system would need to be brought online and gone through and fixed right away so that you could have comfort cooling for school to start. And then you definitely want to roll into the heating side of things right after that.
Yeah, that's going to be the problem, Ms. Green, with prioritizing, is because it all is one system. And if every area has some occupancy, I mean, if we had a wing that wasn't going to be used, then that would be the priority. Don't do those 2 or 3 or 4 air handlers, but do everything else.
Right.
Every place that's occupied, we need to make sure that we provide proper airflow, preferably cooling. I guess you could make that decision. You want to prioritize cooling working versus just having airflow, but it's kind of all kind of one living, breathing system.
Okay. So last question. In totality, what's the time frame we're looking at to get all this work done?
Is that a question for us, Herb? I have to give Herb a little kudos here with that, because they turned Cobo into a 1,000-bed hospital in 8 days. Now, they had to work a lot of hours. We put a lot of bodies on it. So maybe not quite that effort, but it's going to be a pretty good effort. But Herb, go ahead. Knowing that October 1 ish is the start of school.
Say that one more time. Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
So August 1st is when school's coming back in.
First week in August.
The first week of August. So tentatively, we're looking at Wednesday, August 5th. Tentatively, Wednesday, August 5th.
You got 4 more days, Herb.
That would give us a little time with the building empty now to get the critical stuff. But if you're looking at a duration to do the whole project, you're looking more towards, 5 to 6 months to get done what we have to make it occupied. That's where we do what's necessary to make that happen.
Okay. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. I have no more questions.
Thank you.
Okay, we will move from Ms. Danielle Green over to Ms. Vera Perry.
So has administration toured all of our buildings down in their basements so we don't have these kinds of surprises? And is there a plan for administration to make those tours?
So the current administration has not toured all of the buildings. No, ma'am. We can't put that on the list for us to do. Definitely.
Yeah, I think we need to, because looking at all of these pictures, we should have never moved in that building.
Yep.
So that's what I'm saying on that. And on the pictures where it says pumps were missing, et cetera, were those dismantled to repair other machinery in other buildings?
No, Herb, have you heard any of that?
No, and it doesn't appear like the pieces and parts that are laying there, or they failed, and they've been taken out. Now it does look like at one time they were maybe in the process of changing some coils out on units, and then that got stopped because there's remnants of coils laying in some mechanical rooms. I did notice recently, just going through a lot of the mechanical rooms at Northwestern have been cleaned since we were there last. But there's, you can see some remnants of coils and stuff. Like maybe at one time the thought was to replace them, and the work was started and then never finished.
Okay, I think we need a quarterly report on all of our infrastructure so we don't have these types of surprises. Nobody, for whatever reason, and I'm not speaking of present administration because you walked into the mess, but no one throughout my entire time being here goes downstairs, goes in those places. Just looking at those pictures, you can tell that's years and years and years of neglect.
Yes.
So we clean the building, maybe, but we don't think about the infrastructure. And that's not good, because that could, excuse me, I got a dry cough. That could lead us into, well, to steal your word, some type of catastrophic incident. And I mean to the point of something happening in that building that some people could be injured. So I think we need to, there's going to have to be a complete overhaul on everything we're doing now with our infrastructure. Because this is upsetting. This is upsetting. And I'll just repeat, we should have never come in that building. That's it.
Right.
If I could add something regarding the rest of the buildings, they did look like that. And the first portion of our program was to go through those buildings. And so, Herb, correct me if I'm wrong, every or nearly every air handler had been gone through. And you saw the pictures of the before and after. And so we've gone through the rest of the air handlers in the buildings that were in our scope. DTM was not in our scope. Scott was not, but I think they already had a renovation in the mechanical. So the rest of the buildings that were in our scope of work, we've gone through and replaced boilers that need to be replaced, gone through the air handlers. They have new controls. And so a lot of the other buildings have been taken care of as a part of this. But you're right. the reason that they looked the way they looked is because not many bodies had gone into those mechanical rooms on a regular basis and reviewed them for, you know, all the things that we just talked about.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I appreciate you going into those rooms, I mean, those other buildings and taking care of that. But just think of the pictures that looking at them. Think about they were looking the same way. We cannot forget our infrastructure, ladies and gentlemen. That's all I'm saying. We've got to stay on top of
Absolutely.
that.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Perry. And then we'll go over to Mr. Strozier. Mr. Strozier. All right, how about Ms. McIntosh? Do I have Carol or Blake?
Can you hear me?
I can now.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm in a meeting, honey. My thoughts are like the gentleman said, none of our buildings have been maintained. That's how we got in this deal with Johnson Controls, because all of our buildings were poorly maintained and none of them were fit for our students. We had smoldering temperatures in all of our buildings. We were making the news because of that. So Northwestern is no shock. I mean, this is the shape that all of our buildings have been in. And if we don't address it, we're going to build new buildings, which we don't have the money for, or we're going to spend some money on what we have. And that's just the bottom line. Whatever building we went to, it was going to need work. So with that being said, the coils, because I was also wanting to say, because I think we do have to do the cooling if we are going to go back in August, because it is smoldering in August. That's one of our hottest months. So I don't know how we would start school without addressing our cooling issue, versus if we waited and went back later in August, then that would probably give us a break on needing some air conditioning. But if we are going to start the first, then that forces us to address cooling issues immediately, because the food service ladies, the reason they ended up moving around so many times is because every time they cleaned up an area, somebody took their spot from them. So that forced them to have to move. At the end of the day, we have problems in our district and we have to address them. We have to spend our dollars wisely, and it includes repairing our buildings. And I think if we do the cooling, far as the crud, that's what I want to talk about. Far as the crud, I think we do need to have some of that tested, because we've been lied to concerning our water, our pipes, and everything. With us having a lawsuit and litigations, I think it would be wise on our part to just have that tested, just in case. None of us are experts. He said he's not sure. I don't think we should take the chance of missing the opportunity to get in on that and maybe solidify our case with the state concerning the water crisis. And like he said, with the pandemic, if we go back the first week in August, then we need to get our cooling system together, and then we have to have our air quality situation dealt with, because we have a pandemic and a crisis concerning breathing and air. So those are two things, I think they go hand in hand, and I don't see how we could have gotten around them. And I don't know, maybe like everybody suggested, maybe we'll get this done and pay in sections. I know we were supposed to get some dollars back from being involved in the program with Johnson and Johnson Controls and getting our stuff redone. And I'd like to know, what is the cost overall for new stuff versus the rehabbing that he spoke of? That's all.
Could I get recognized?
Yeah, let me go to Blake real quick, see if he's back on. If he's not, then I'll jump right to you, Ms. Perry. Blake, are you back on with us? Hi, Ms. Perry.
Yeah, you've heard me say this before, and I'm going to say it again. Carol just brought it back to my mind. This district has never PM'd any of their machines. We did no PMing. I've been sitting here 17 years, and it took me 2 years to even make them say, no, we never PM'd. And I said, who runs a company like this that has all this type of machinery and you don't even do pre-maintenance to it? Preventative maintenance, I should say. So I'm hoping as we're moving forward that we will begin to do preventative maintenance on our buildings, on our infrastructure. That's what helps you not have these $4 million bills or these 581,000 types of bills.
Exactly.
You may have to spend 100,000 because depending on what it truly is, but that's a far cry from the 4 mil and the 500,000. So that's something that we are going to have to really do because this district never. Southwestern was built in 1958 or 59, never had been PM'd when I got elected to the board in 2003. That's scary.
And you avoid negative publicity when you take care of your business and your properties and stuff.
Exactly.
Mr.
Okay,
Lester,
I'm done.
Mr. Lester, if it's possible, I'd like to just say something.
Sure, Ms. Ramsdale.
Just so you understand where my questions were coming from. My questions are coming from if we had known all this before, like Ms. Perry said, we would never have opened that building and used it. And that's where some of the things come in about, we thought we had everything checked and what it was, but I can't see that amount of money we don't have, and putting good money in bad, not my idea of a fun time. Or we really need to, I mean, obviously the board really needs to talk about this, but I just wanted understood where I was coming from too.
I like to be recognized. Please. Anyway, the bottom line is this. We have to invest in something on the north side for our north side students. Remember, that's how we lost all our students to Hamity, Beecher, Carmen, and everybody else. We have to take care of our stuff, period. Not coming into one of our own properties. How is that a solution when everything we had was tore up and in distress? We had nothing decent enough to really send a student into. We weren't just in the news because Northwestern was hot. We were in the news because mostly all of our buildings were hot. So, you know, it is so typical of this board to want to abandon the north side or turn our heads. Let's quit getting sued, and then let's be a responsible board, and then we can take those dollars and invest in our infrastructure and in our community and in our schools, and we can afford something nice. Let's make some intelligent decisions, because avoiding the north side, avoiding Northwestern, avoiding Northern, and running to Southwestern has not helped us. We have lost a tremendous count of students because of our lack of integrity to service our buildings and listen to our community. So we can, you know, go back to saying we should never went there, but we went to Southwestern. We lost a lot of students. So that wasn't a win situation. That wasn't no big, better idea. We serviced DTM and we serviced Scott and we serviced all these South Side schools, but now that it's time to service Northwestern, all of a sudden, oh, woe was us. Gee whiz. I'm done.
Board President, may I make a comment?
Yeah, Ms. Wright.
You know, one of the things that I think, which I know it was said, but I'm not sure if it sort of went, you know, was kind of not paid much attention to, but Mr. Mack said that what we saw in his presentation for Northwestern was the condition of all of our schools. So, but my point is that, you know, the whole point of going with Johnson Controls was to bring all of the schools up to standard.
Yes.
Issue is that, you know, initially Northwestern was not part of that. And, you know, due to all of the things that fell through as it relates to the Flint Junior High, we ended up putting those students at Northwestern. Now that they're there, and I'm sure you all have heard me say many times, we create the instability that our students face. You know, we always talk about how parents, you know, they're not stable. They move from here to there. We've created a system of instability for our own students just through our school closing process. Because I know I've shared with you that on the north end, for a period of 5 or 6 years, students were moving every 2 years because the school that we sent them to after we closed their previous school, that school closed. So we kept doing that until we ended up with 3 buildings basically on the north end. So while I agree with Miss McIntosh, Miss McIntosh's comments about not abandoning the north end, it's important that we follow through, if at all possible, with the recommendations from Johnson Controls. You know, watching those videos, the presentations, you know, I know based from a historical perspective why this happened. It all happened because of budget cuts. I mean, we had complete teams of custodial people and journeymen and skilled tradesmen who worked in this district. So all of those rooms that they're going into now that look like nobody's been in them is because nobody has. Because all of the people, we had people who were journeymen welders and carpenters and HVAC people. We had all that here, you know, before we started cutting money and contracting out services and all of that. So he's absolutely right. Nobody has been in those areas because we just contract people to put on Band-Aids for the past 10, 12 years. We didn't have people to actually go in those areas who knew what they were doing. So my position is, no, I do not want to abandon the North End. Yes, I want our students to have quality learning environments, but where are we going to get the money?
Well, before we get into that part of the conversation, Ms. Wright, let's, does anybody else have any other questions for Johnson Controls currently?
Yes, I do. As a matter of fact, I do.
All right, Ms. McIntosh.
Is everybody there?
Is any of this work included in, because it was a program where we were getting dollars back for installing efficient equipment, and as it cut our electric bills, it's like we were getting a residual back from doing that. Is that program in conjunction with this work, or is that over with, or what's going on with that?
Yeah, so I'll answer that. So we still have work to do in the other buildings in terms of lighting, water conservation in the restrooms, and I think some building envelope improvements. And so this would be a change of work in that overall program at Northwestern. So this would be tied to that. It would be part of the same program because that program is ongoing until we're done with all of the work. Which we had to pause the work back in January because the bonds hadn't been sold, and so we had done a lot of work and the funding wasn't released yet, so we had to pause until it looks like at the end of this month the bonds should be sold and we'll be able to get paid for the work we've done and for the rest of the work. So the work that we would do at Northwestern is still part of this overall program, which is basically the energy savings and operational savings that are obtained through all of the work that we've done and intend to complete. Those savings will go back to the general fund. The way I understand the project's being paid for is the sinking fund is actually paying for the project, And so all the savings would go back to the general fund for whatever you intend to use them for.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if nobody else has any questions for Johnson Controls, Ms. Stewart, I think this is where we were going to let them go, and then we will jump into a bit more of a discussion.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. It's been a great discussion, great questions. Obviously, Ms. Stewart, if you have any other questions, you know how to contact me. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So that being said, I'd like two things. So I want to hear from administration and kind of hear what your thoughts are with everything, you know, what your opinions are and stuff, yada yada. And then the other thing, I'd like for us to stay focused more on what we plan to do tomorrow and not what we did yesterday. So through this conversation, let's not focus on things that we can't change, things that we can't fix, things that already happened, because I think we have a tendency to get wrapped up in the past and in our you know, previous sins, and I don't think that's going to be anything that's constructive for this conversation. So let's do what we can to remain focused on moving forward and what we need to do to fix whatever got us in this situation. So Ms. Stewart and administration, if you'll kind of give us your, you know, your opinion, what you think, your thoughts, stuff of that nature.
So before I go into that, if you will allow President Lester, I would like to defer to Carrie Sikowski for a moment because Mrs. Wright asked the question, where are we going to get the money? Which was the question that Carrie and I both were asking ourselves when Johnson Control first presented this information to us. And so I would like to defer to Carrie for a minute to talk about our financial situation, the sinking bond, and where this $4 million actually puts us. So Carrie, are you on? Can I turn it over to you at this point?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, so Carrie, will you talk about our financial situation and what this $4 million will do for us financially?
Sure. So one thing I just wanted to know, Dan Mack there from JCI talked about the $560,000 to lay up the building. That money is part of the energy bond that we will be selling hopefully at the end of this month. So that's where that money could help offset if we decided not to lay up the building. We could then have that conversation about applying it towards some of the other projects that were mentioned today for Northwestern. Currently, our sinking fund has approximately $2.2 million in the sinking fund. So between that and the 560, we're about $2.8 million that we could use towards the project. We, given the state of our budget for next year, we do not have any other additional funds to put towards these types of renovations. It would be a severe cut on our general operating fund. The other thing that I want to mention as you're having discussions and thinking about different options is when the new millage was passed in March, we have always had a 4 mil sinking fund for the last 10 years at least. When we passed the new fiscal stability millage for the fiscal stability bond in March, we are taking 2.82 mils of that 4 to pay that general fund operating debt, that old debt that we had on our books. That reduces our sinking fund to 1.18 mils. Almost the whole entire collection will be used to pay the energy bond. The district and sinking fund is going to, we used to receive around $3 million a year. We will probably receive about $200,000 in sinking fund. So going forward, we really have no revenue stream to even try to keep up with projects. So if we were able to make some reductions in the general fund to come up with that additional $1.2 million to get this project done for $4 million. That would leave us in a situation where we have not another dollar coming into the district, and we have 12 other buildings to maintain. We have a lot of roofing issues. We just received a lot of rain over the last couple of weeks. We have severe leaks. We just had a major parking lot issue at Northwestern due to a water break. We have major parking lot issues throughout the district. We would not, if we deplete our funds to try to get this $4 million project done, we will leave ourselves in a position that we will have a very difficult time to do any other repair on any other building. The roof at Northwestern is in very, very bad shape. And another roofing, I mentioned in the memo that I sent, another roofing concern we have is at Doyle Ryder. That roof is leaking so bad, it is actually starting to ruin some of the brand new JCI work that we have not even paid for yet. It's already starting to damage that. So we just have found ourselves in a situation where we have no additional sinking fund revenues. And what we do have, if we put towards this one project, we're going to leave ourselves wide open for other risk. Does anybody have any questions about that?
Yes, I do have a question.
Sure.
I know there are probably people thinking I left. No, I just had another meeting to go run to. But so quick question for you, Mrs. Sakowski. So thinking about the finances right now, and I know that this may be a little premature to look at it. Your assessment is that we don't have enough money to fund any of the renovations that have been proposed by Johnson Control, and for us to be sustainable and for us to do any type of repairs to any other building if we were to go into this area.
Correct.
Okay, and so here's the big question that I have. Structurally, if we were to, I thought some of what Johnson Controls were supposed to do was based on the energy bond and the self-renewal that was presented to us, that by us doing certain amounts of projects that we would get certain amount of funding back in rebates, and that would fund our self-renewal. Is that still accurate? Because from what I was understanding from the previous meeting, which Johnson Controls, is some of the repairs will have to come out of our own funds. When it was presented to us initially last year, it was based on the fact that most of the repairs for heating and cooling, roofing, some of those would come from the self-renewal, that we would actually get an increase in our funding coming in from the state rather than using our own funding to fund these projects.
So, right, what I believe, I'm not sure exactly what the conversation was prior, but how these energy bond funds work is that by putting in the newer equipment that's more energy efficient, that we're able to regulate through a computer system, if we need to turn the boilers down, or we can make those adjustments without having to be in the building. And plus, again, they're new and more energy efficient. We would receive a cost saving. So we would receive savings just in a reduction in our consumer's energy bill, just as you would in your own private home. You have a 30-year-old furnace, you put in the latest and greatest high energy furnace, you're hopefully going to see a reduction in what you pay monthly to consumers. There's not an actual revenue stream that we receive from the state of Michigan or from any other entity. It's just going to be a reduction in our costs. So what they did prior to the project starting was they reviewed our consumer costs, our heating and our electrical, and looked at how can we reduce the energy usage in the district. And if those costs were great enough, then it would pay for the energy bond.
Gotcha.
So that kind of shifted over the past year, where again, the sinking fund is going to pay that energy back, because in reality, if you've had an opportunity to look at your budget, we need all the savings that we can get just to operate our general fund. So we're having to shift that payment over to the sinking fund. Again, that's funded by the taxpayers. And then we're hopefully going to get the savings on our general fund side so that we can put those dollars into the classroom.
Understandable. Wow.
Yeah.
So to board members, I understand what's going on. I'm not really amazed, but I know that this is, I know Mrs. Perry has said this years ago, and I remember when she said it, she said, we need to start being a proactive district rather than reactive district when it comes to our equipment, our buildings, our infrastructure. And even though it was said about 6 years ago, it still is yet to be seen, and we are hurting because of that, because we're still reactive instead of being proactive. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I yield back my time, but I just, it's painful because some of these things that, you know, with Northwestern being in the condition that it is, and I didn't say this earlier because I was just listening. Northwestern being the condition that it is to me shameful. Mm-hmm. To have people go in there, and that's a representation of our building, and to have people walk through that place, to me is a detriment to us as a district. And it goes into that whole concept about being reactive instead of proactive. We weren't proactively looking at the pump in Northwest. We weren't proactively looking at the heating and cooling, proactively looking at the roofing. If you drive past Northwestern right now, there are panels of the roof still missing. And that's something that the kids see every day. Mm-hmm. And that says a lot to us as a district. And so I just hope that in the discussion that we have, that it's proactive rather than, you know, and I heard President Lester saying, we can't dwell in the past, but this not the past in certain cases, because I saw the missing panels this morning driving past Northwestern. I saw when I was in there before the coronavirus ended, I saw a ceiling tile cave in. You know, that's not something that you can just dismiss as 5 years ago. This is something that students will see in the fall if they reconvene back at that building. So I yield back my time.
Thank you, Mr. Strozier. So does anybody else have any questions right now for
something, Mr. Lester?
Yep, absolutely.
I just want to be clear. I do not want to desert that. I do not want to desert anything. I want to be able to have education that works. And when we say proactive, we also have to just remember some of the things we have been through. When I came on the board, I think we were at 15,000 students. That was 10 years ago, and we are down to less than 3,000. And, you know, yeah, we don't have a crystal ball, but I do not want to desert the North End. I don't want to desert any of our schools.
Right.
I don't desert our kids. I don't want to desert our families. Okay, so I just want that clear, that's where I stand with it. I would like to be helpful in, you know, what's our plan of action going to be? You know, we've got a lot of talking to do, and I think that's just obvious. And we're going to have to listen and compromise and adjust. Bottom line is for kids to get an education. But we are going to have to listen to each other and compromise and understand, you know, all of that kind of stuff. As Ms. Wright said, I remember when we had one of the best maintenance staffs in the whole world. I mean, they could do anything and did for you.
But they didn't do it.
When the governor changed when they said everybody could retire early, and they did, they then put the retirement funds, instead of paying it from the state, they put that back on the school district. And so the only way the school district could survive was to let the maintenance and the secretaries go. That's what we all decided. Everybody was there. You had to, because we couldn't afford to pay their retirements. You know, it was, you know, we've been crossed over, screwed over, and everything else, the school districts. So that's all I have to say.
Oh,
Thank you.
Mrs. Green?
You are on mute, Mrs. Green. Miss Green.
Ms. Green, you're muted.
Oh, thank you, whoever did that. So a lot of things happen in the past that affects the present. We do need, I do think we have some things that we have to deal with because of the past choices that were made. But I feel like because we got a board full of intelligent people who have been through things, know some things, but I still feel like we be getting tricked. I don't, and I'm not saying by any board members, but I'm saying when we get these people coming here with these great presentations and we smiling and we happy thinking we making some progress, it seems like we never do. I don't know how we switch from being reactive from proactive. I mean, from, you know what I'm saying. But
Yeah.
I'm saying the director of facilities, we don't have that person anymore. Because I know Perry said about with us going in and keeping the maintenance. Miss Perry brought it up, and I think they kind of feel about it because at least I thought the directors of facilities, that's one of their responsibilities.
Code followed by the pound or hash sign.
Mr. Ford got, I don't even know if we had one before him. But I still feel like we be getting tricked, like of us telling us what we want to hear. And you know, we ask questions, we try and we dig. We still, I think, are being misled or deceived. And I don't know if it's just me. I just feel like we are. And I think people are constantly, you know, building financial gain from us, and we're still losing. And I don't know what we need to do. I just don't know. But I thank God we do have a board full of intelligent people who dig and know some things and do some things so we can figure this out. From a lot of different people. That's all for me, Casey.
Mr. Lester.
Mrs.
What's
Strozier?
going on with the sound?
I have no idea.
Talking, then we should put our phones on mute. For example, like I can see when Ms. Green is talking, it will pop up somebody else's name if they're not muted.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Okay, because I'm for some reason I got kicked out of the webinar. So I'm having to go to my phone now.
Okay.
We can hear you.
So, Ms. Stewart, what's your opinion? What do you think? I mean, what's our, plan, one direction or the other? What do you think?
So I wanted an opportunity for JCI to present, and then I wanted an opportunity for Carrie to present our financial situation. And then my goal was hoping that we can have a brainstorming session to brainstorm a couple ideas, settle on one if we're going to do anything, settle on one, and then take board action on that one if we're going to do that one. And so I was hoping that we could have a brainstorming session. And so I'm going to ask if, Monica, can you share your screen and pull up a white piece of paper so that we can kind of brainstorm what it is that we're thinking that we would do based upon the information that we've heard from JCI about Flint Junior High and from Ms. Sikowski about our financial situation.
Oh, I thought you were going to become the presenter. I'm sorry.
And so I thought that we would come up with a couple different options. Option one, let me know when you're ready, Mo.
Can you all hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
Okay. It started up again.
Okay. You can just pull up Word. You can type it in Word. So that way we can see the different options.
Mr. Lester?
Yes, sir.
Before we go, I wanted to, Danielle made a point a couple minutes ago. I felt that way for past couple months because I remember when Jeff Bennett, Weatherspoon, Gennaro, and a few others came with this plan to move Central Kitchen to Northwestern. And some of us gave the same questions that we gave today about, is it conducive? Is it going to hurt us in the long run? And I remember Jeff Bennett standing there and he wanted the bells and whistles to go into Central Kitchen. And he basically tore out the entire cafeteria of Northwestern and turned it into a kitchen. And I still believe this day there are things in that kitchen that we really don't need, but he put in there because it was going to increase his fee. So, you know, that's just my opinion. I believe that there have been instances where there have been architects. I mean, we can go door right now. There are cabinets in the middle of a hallway that shouldn't even be there. So, you know, there have been times where people have taken things from even our bond proposal where they put doors and new windows in places that had just got new doors and windows a few years ago, or they didn't put a new roof down, but they put new playground equipment in. You know, there are certain times where we've relied on those who we thought had our best interests at heart, as far as with our building maintenance operations, and they turned around and they patted their own pockets in trying to make sure that they got what they wanted rather than us getting what we needed. Because some of these issues with our building should have been taken care of 10 years ago. And when I say Miss Perry, because some of this Miss Perry was looking at, and Mrs. Ramsdale, even Mrs. Lockett, when they were part of the committee that looked into infrastructure, some of those things on that document, which is actually a document that the district has, some of those same things that they highlighted never got addressed and are just now getting addressed, but it's almost 10, 15 years after the fact that they should have been addressed.
So are you ready? No?
Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can. Okay.
Okay.
Option one. Can you guys see that, or does Mo need to make that a little larger?
Yeah, please.
Make it larger.
A whole lot larger.
Larger, please, so that they can see it.
There
Okay.
you go.
Yep. So option one, as is to leave the students at Flint Junior High. And if the students stay at Flint Junior High, you can make it another bullet, just bullet it. We would have to sink about $3.5 million into Flint Junior High. Is that correct, Ms. Carey? Please correct me if I say anything wrong. 3.5 million.
Correct.
Yep.
Real quick, I hate to interrupt.
Can you put, instead of sink, can you put approximate cost instead of the word sink?
Right, please.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Change that to invest.
Yeah. And then that would cause us to have to use everything that we have for our sinking fund. That would be the next bullet. Next bullet, next bullet, next bullet. Yeah, right under that.
Superintendent Stewart.
Yes.
Now, could those repairs be done during the school year, or would those repairs have to be done before they can even go into the building in August?
So if I understood correctly, Johnson Controls stated that there were some things that they could start on now, but then there will be some things that they would have to do when while the students were in school.
So maybe deplete sinking fund would be the appropriate to underscore that that would be using all of our funds and then an additional 1.2 million from the general fund.
From the general fund? Okay,
Yes.
additional from the,
Additional 1.2 from general. Thank you. And then can you also add, Carrie lifted, that once we deplete the sinking fund, there would be no money for any repairs to any of the other buildings. Anything else, Carrie, that you would want to add here for option 1? Carrie?
I'm sorry. No, I think that covers option 1, leaving the students there. It sounds like JCI would be able to start the chiller part and hopefully would have that running, but at least would be on site when, if school was to start in early August. So, and then of course throughout the rest, before heating season, they would hopefully have the next section finished. So I don't think that would be a concern as far as getting the work done.
Okay. Option 2, and by no means, I know that there's not one person on this call that want to move students out of Flint Junior High, but I think we need to have some options on the table. So option 2 would be for students to be relocated from Flint Junior High. And then that's where I'm asking the board to join me in this brainstorming session. What would that look like if so we had to relocate the students from Flint Junior High?
New leadership.
Excuse me?
New leadership. You said what it's going to look like.
No, if we have to move the students from Flint Junior High, where would they go?
Right.
Oh, well.
Yeah, if we have to relocate them from Flint Junior High, where would they go? What would we do? What would we do? What are a couple of options that we can brainstorm together?
Well, what's happening with Scott?
So currently ALA is at Scott.
So they're going to remain at Scott.
As of right now, yes, because the board made a decision that they didn't want any movement. And so
Okay.
all schools are remaining in place.
So then the only option you got, if you close up Northwestern, is going to Holmes, and I cannot agree to that, but that's your only option.
you know,
Hold on, question.
Yes.
Is anybody else have a question before I go ahead?
yeah, well, no, Blake, I'll follow you, but I have some thoughts. Yeah.
Okay, I agree with Mrs. Perry with that. I actually asked board president this in a text, and if we close Northwestern right now, I know Johnson Controls were there. I know that the McCree Theater was there. I know that there were different activities that were in the building. So my question would be, would the building really be closed, especially since we're going to have Central Kitchen there? Because I think with closing Northwestern, you have to look into what it would look like to close Northwestern. And you can't close a certain section of the building and say, well, we're not going to have students here, but you're still going to be pulling electricity, water, you're still going to be pulling those utilities, which will still be a cost to the district. And we still have to do some repairs that may not be those big ticket repairs, but they would still be repairs that would be taken from the building. Gosh, I'm going church. Building fund that would be coming from the sinking fund. So that's my question is, are we talking about the complete closure of the entire facility and removing of all of those programs in there? Or are we just talking about the closure of the school part where there are actual students in there? And we're going to look into closing those other sections and have we evaluate how much of a cost that would be long term for us to just do it like that?
So I think that could be two options. One could be to to just relocate the students and leave the central kitchen there, because I think the thought before was we put $1 million into the central kitchen to stay there. And as JCI spoke earlier, they could just section it off and just do the work needed for a central kitchen. And that may be, I'm stressing may, be the cost of the 581 that was already set aside for that work, because that was the original plan. Or are we looking at relocating the students and central kitchen?
Well, yeah,
That would be just awful.
that would be awful.
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
I'm sorry, Blake. I interrupted you.
that was
Can I
Casey.
would like to-
Raise your hand or something.
Well, I would, but I'm not visual.
No, I'm talking
Yeah,
about for myself, not you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You said, can we
I just,
raise
when Blake
your
is
hand?
finished.
No, we can't see you
Because I
raise your
want, because I want
Yeah,
to
but-
speak.
When
I don't
Blake-
want that
Yeah.
little hand thing.
So,
So Anita,
Yeah.
real quick, I
Yeah.
think something else too. So I'm gonna tomorrow I'll reach out to some more of the foundations and just see if anybody, has any extra money laying around. I mean, some of the issues that we're gonna look at is that everybody is in a super tough economic time right now, and so whereas everybody's philanthropy before might not be as deep as what it was. So that's a big concern. The other thing is if we're looking at a $750 to $1,000 per pupil allocation reduction, that's $4 million essentially that we're looking at losing off of our budget. That's doubling our operating deficit. So, I mean, the other side is that there was a conversation that a couple of us been a part of with Mott about potentially looking at building new locations and putting new schools in place. I would hate for us to put $4 million into a school that potentially in 3 years be replaced by a brand new building or something to that effect. So I've got some homework to do on my end to figure out, kind of where we're at with that conversation, if that's a sooner rather than later conversation. Because I think, figuring out all of those pieces I think are very important. I mean, if somebody says, hey, listen, from the state, we're looking at building a new school on the north side, awesome. We need it, because I would rather a brand new building be put up for $2.5 or $3 million than put $4 million in it. You know what I'm saying? So I think while this is a really good start and brainstorming is good, I don't think this is the complete puzzle, right? I think that there's other pieces to this conversation that we really need to have, because we also don't know what the state guidelines are going to be, right? So is the state going to come back and say that we have bigger distancing rules and we're going to need that facility, so we have no choice but to, you know what I mean? So there's a lot of other questions I think that we don't have the answers to here in order to be able to make it accurate. I don't know. The hard thing is I don't feel like we have enough information right now to be able to accurately say this is something that we should do. Does anybody else kind of feel that way? Am I on an island with that?
No, I agree with you. I totally agree that we don't have enough information because it can keep changing. But I also think that we need to have some options. We need to have some thoughts anyway. And one of those thoughts, when we voted on some of the things we voted on, Ms. Stewart, which I appreciate your consideration and all that, we did not take into consideration, I mean, these things weren't on the table then. And we would rather not close buildings, but I think that we have to get to a point where we decide where we want what. And we may have to make some concessions, as hard as that is. We may have to make some concessions, but we just need to have a plan, whatever that might be, and to have option 1, option 2, option 3. And we need to be flexible because we just don't have enough.
I
We don't,
agree. And I think, the flexibility can, oh, I'm sorry.
no, that we just don't know enough, Casey. You're right. We do not know enough to know what we're planning for. We don't know, but we still need to talk about it. And what is acceptable and what do we know, and all of those kinds of things, and not say yay or nay right away on anything.
And that was just the whole idea, just to come away with some options that we can narrow down to possibly 3 options. You continue to do your research, continue to ask the questions that you need to ask, and then at some point in time, we either make a decision about one of the options, or we say, no, we're not going to do anything with any of the options. We're going to keep moving in the vein that we're moving in.
Anita, when we first started this conversation, it really was about you having information that you needed so that you could, so that you could begin planning with your staff how, about school opening and student placement and so forth. So what kind of timeline do you need us to consider as you work toward planning for the opening of school? Because I don't, that was kind of the major consideration with all of it.
Yes. So with the district reopening plan, there are a couple of subcommittees, and the subcommittees have begun their work. I know actually 3 subcommittees met today. One of them is around school operations, right? And so whatever decision that we make, or whatever options we put on the table, school operations will need to consider those options that you put on the table for when they're planning for fall of 2021. Unfortunately, our fall starts sooner than everybody else's. Our fall starts in August. And so we were looking and hoping to have a district reopening plan completed by the end of June 30th so that we can begin communicating that plan to our families as well as to our community members. Because we know that parents start making choices about where their child is going to be in the fall. They start making those decisions in June, and some are even a little more proactive and start making those decisions in May. But we wanted to have a full communication plan that we could communicate to our families and the community beginning the first week of July.
Okay, so what you're saying is we need to get off the pot.
I think, and if I'm interrupting somebody, oh gosh, my headset.
Yeah, you interrupted me, Casey. I'm just teasing.
I'm so sorry. My headset keeps shutting off, and you can hear me, but I can't hear you. So it'll get quiet, and I assume everybody's done talking for a second, and I try to jump in, and I'm just talking over everybody. So I apologize for that. Continue.
No, I was kidding when I said you interrupted me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Could I say something?
Sure, absolutely.
Our backs are truly against the wall, and this is no fault of anyone but Miss COVID-19. I do believe if it hadn't been for COVID, well, we may be in a different place. But it looks like, actually, because it looks like we have 2 weeks to make a decision. And I don't want us to make the wrong decision. But I think, we need to research more of students going into Northwestern, into homes, because, the board had put all that aside. We said nothing to close, but now we need to do some more research on this because, I hate to have that we would have to do it, but it sounds like we just have to move because we can't deplete our sinking fund, because if some damage happens at another building, we won't have any money to repair that. I don't want to go to the foundations and ask for money because within 3 years, we may be in a similar situation with something else. And I keep saying you can't borrow yourself out of problems.
Oh, sure. Yes.
We're just
And
gonna
so
have to, we just have to bite the bullet, I guess. I don't know, but I'm done.
I have a question.
Mrs.
Stewart, Mrs.
Yes.
Stewart, in
Yes.
regards to the 7th to 8th graders,
Mm-hmm.
I know there's capacity in all the elementary schools. What is the likelihood? Because this is what I don't want to see. We all have been to homes when the middle school children were all there. I would rather see us return all 7th to 8th graders to their community schools before we just put everybody into the homes building. I think that will probably be better for the community as a whole, is that in some cases you have some parents that are pretty hesitant to return back to school, and just the fact that if there's space in our buildings for a 7th or 8th grade classroom, that might actually be more receptive for people, that they don't have to go to the north side for their junior high school experience. Just throwing it out there, because for one, I'm not comfortable. I'm not comfortable putting all those children into the school again, unless we have Joe Clark as the principal. And that's just stating the true facts. Is you need to have a strong-willed principal to shepherd almost 400 kids through their adolescent age group. And sad to say, that was not at that school. And anyone besides someone that is stern, that is not a Cheryl Tate, a Clyde Bell, a Herman Fry, or someone of that caliber, you're not going to have success in that junior high school. I would rather have the principals that know these 7th to 8th graders, who know their issues, who can assist them in getting to some type of help, guidance, and direction. I'd rather them still stay with them for those next 2 years. And let's be honest, we don't know where the district will be in the next 2 years. That's the truest. We take all the kids, put them in homes. That'll be the 3rd time we've moved them. Some of these kids, we've moved them every year since the 6th grade. And so there's no consistency. Mrs. Wright did say that we have been the least consistent of any organization in some of these children's lives. And that's no fault of theirs. That's of some of our poor planning previously under former superintendents. So I just would rather some type of continuity. If we are to close Northwestern, if we are to realign, I would rather it be realigned inside of the schools that they are currently in, and the students that are in the junior high school now, that we will just put them back in their previous elementary schools, and then just continue to operate as if we have we need to have a master plan. What's the end goal of our district? If our district is to have 4 elementary schools, 1 middle school, 1 high school, we need to start telling the parents and the community members, this is our goal, is to go down to 6 schools, and this is going to be the new Flint. But for us to just, because I feel that in the next 2 years, I won't be there, but in the next 2 years, there'll be someone else, they'll say, we need to close another school. We need to close another elementary school. We need to close another school on this side of town. And we're always closing. We're never talking about construction. I think at this time, for those that are poker, I think this is our time to hold them and not fold them right now. That we need to be more concerned about just maintaining what we have, not put all these kids in one building and then just say that'll do for right now, but actually put them back in the elementary schools and then just continue. I believe there's space in all of our elementary schools, minus 2 schools, DTM and possibly I'd say Potter. But I believe there's at least some space in all of our schools where you can have at least 2 additional classrooms for 7th to 8th graders, so those students can stay there. If I'm wrong,
Mo, can you do me a favor? Mo, can you relocate students from Flint Junior High, delete that under option 2. Yeah. So the first thing that I heard was move the Flint Junior High into homes. That was the first thing that I heard. And then option 3 was what Board Member Strozier just lifted. All elementary buildings, K through 8. Okay. I can only see Ms. Green's hand, so I'm not sure if somebody else had their hand raised other than Ms. Green. Ms. Green?
How many students does Holmes hold? What's the capacity for that building?
The capacity for Holmes is
I believe it's 600 or 700.
Okay, and we're looking at around 400. I think did you say like 400 and something, 7th and 8th grader?
About 425, 450. I don't want to step over Mrs. Stewart, but I believe it was somewhere in the 400s.
Okay.
I think it was 7 something. I was just looking for my map and I can't find map capacity on it.
Okay, and we don't have this Joe Clark available. I wish we did, because we move them into, we need a Joe Clark for sure. So we have to think about the administration anyway, regardless of where the 7th and 8th graders are going. I would hate to see 7th and 8th graders in the building with the babies.
I just,
so let me add Ms. Green.
To see that. And I understand we can do some things, but for me, I would hate to see that. I just would. For me, if I had a child in any district with the lack of stability that we displayed, and then we put them in the buildings with the babies, my kids come out immediately.
Yes. Cassandra, are you on the line, Ms. Washington? We did have some people to apply for the elementary as well as the middle school principal position.
Yes.
Ms. Washington had a lot of people to apply. Ms. Washington, are you on the line?
Yes, I'm here.
How many people did you have to apply for the middle school position, just overall number?
I believe it was 34 for the middle school and 32 for the principals, and we actually have interviews scheduled for several hours tomorrow to interview the principals, as well as I believe on Thursday.
So 34 for the middle school alone?
Yeah.
How many for the?
I have a question.
I'm sorry. It's 32. 32 for the principal position, and so we will be interviewing. I think it is 10 from each. From 8 to 10 candidates for the elementary and for the secondary. So it will be a total of 10 candidates.
Did Miss Dinetta apply that is already the principal there? The assistant principal?
I'm confused.
Oh, you mean Miss Daphne Jackson?
No, I'm talking about Miss Dinetta. She is assistant.
Oh, yes.
oh, Dinetta Moore.
Yes, Miss Moore. Yes, she did apply, and she will be afforded an interview.
Okay, all right.
Miss, I'm still confused about the 32 and the 8 to 10 and the 10. I guess I'm still confused about the.
Okay, I'm sorry. It was the posting was put up to establish the eligibility pool for principal for the elementary as well as the junior high. So we got 32 total candidates. After we vetted the candidates, we had total. So after we vetted the candidates, then we scheduled interviews to interview 10 candidates.
Gotcha.
Yeah, Miss Moore is one of those. Yes.
I got 10 for the middle school and 10 for elementary.
Okay. I have my hand
up. Final number?
I had my hand up. Do you see my hand, Miss Anita?
No, ma'am, I can't see your hand. I just see your pretty face.
I can't either. I mean,
I can't see Miss still at all. So
Diana,
your face is frozen.
Yes. Mrs. Green, did that answer your question?
It's been frozen the whole time.
Just let me know. That's fine.
But Mrs. Stewart, I guess we are
answer your question.
How many for the middle school and how many for the elementary? Once they were vetted, how many?
Ms. Washington, how many are you interviewing for the middle school?
I'm pulling it up now so we can see.
Yeah, for something in it, but I wasn't quite sure.
I'm sorry, give me one moment. I'm just pulling it up in the spreadsheet so I can see.
And while she's looking for that, will we get an opportunity to see resumes for all candidates, or just once we get them narrowed down?
It's normally just once
Yeah.
they're narrowed down and the person that comes to you. That's normally what happens.
Okay, thank
you. All right. I'm not sure who was Miss Green. We'll come back to you. I know Miss Washington is looking for it, and I want to give her allow her the time to look for it and then come back around to you. But for time's sake, can we go on to the next person? Okay.
And Miss Wright has her hand
Let me know when you find it. So I'm not sure who was next, whether it was Mrs. Wright or Mrs. Ramsdale. I'll go with Mrs. Wright and then Mrs. Ramsdale, you next, just because I can see Mrs. Wright on my screen. Mrs. Wright?
Can you put me down, Mrs. Stewart, too?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Mr. Dozier.
You know, I am very much opposed to moving those children, and I do understand the financial constraints that we're operating under. So, but you know, as I said before, we have to really, I'm sorry, my phone is ringing. You know, consider it's more than about the money. We also have to consider the children, and as Mr. Strozier sort of focused on what I had said earlier, we have created such a sense of instability with those children because they have just been moved, and yeah, the faces change, but then some of those kids have been a part of every move. So, you know, I just hope we can find a way to create some stability, even if we have to come up with a phase out plan or something like that for that school. The other thing I want us to consider.
Right, before you move there, you said a phase out plan for that school. So are you saying kids stay there and we phase them out? Is that what I hear you saying?
I mean, if we can't find money to house to do the necessary upgrades, anything to not have them shifted about. I don't know what that would look like. But yeah, that's what came to mind, was to phase them out.
So Mo, can you put that down as an option 4?
And then the other thing is, and I know this was part of the initial discussion about the reopen plan. I don't know what kind of conditions will be set for kids to return to school. And I know I've read information from other districts where they're reducing the class size so that there's only 16 kids in the classroom. So you need space in order to accomplish that. And so therefore you're going to need more classrooms, which I guess with a system like that, then all the kids wouldn't go to school every day because we couldn't hire that number of teachers. But
we have an A day and a B day.
Right. So before we make a decision to start shifting kids into buildings, we also need to know exactly what are the requirements that the state or will, you know, place on schools in as a strategy to the ability that we would have a second wave of the pandemic. So there are so many other things, and I guess it goes back to what some of you have said about us not having enough information, because even with the possibility of closing Northwestern, we still have to figure out, well, how are we going to accommodate everybody that's still here if we end up under those kinds of conditions. So, I mean, there's just so many things to consider, but I do want to say the last thing I want to consider is moving those middle school kids one more time. We're affecting those kids at the most developmentally
fragile
fragile. That's the word I wanted. The developmentally fragile point of their lives. And it's just not good. It's just not good. So anyway, that's it.
So your phase out plan, that is, I just want to make sure that I have an option there for what you just listed. A phase out plan would be kids possibly staying there 2021 school year, maybe even longer, but we have a plan to phase them out of Flint Junior High. Is that what option 4 could look like?
Phase 4 last resort.
Phase option 4 is last resort. Got it. Thank you. Okay. Ms. Ramsdale and then Mr. Strozier.
A couple of things. First, what Ms. Wright just said, I agree with. And my thought is, first of all, let's pray for a guardian angel coming from Casey that somehow we will get someone to say, yes, we will do a new school for you, so we can say to parents and stuff, okay, we're going here for this year. We pray nothing fails, but that's what we're going to do. But if we have a long-term plan, it makes it easier. Another question that I have is, we've made some decisions, but we can't, in these kinds of times, nothing can be written in absolute stone. I would go totally against having the kids go back to the elementary schools. I talked to some of the teachers that I was close to, and they said some of the things that the kids did with the younger kids. Somebody said, here, look at, if you want to have sex, here's a banana, and that's a true story. I'm serious. I'm serious. Okay. I would never say that if it weren't true, but it is.
I'm just thinking how horrible it was.
Oh yeah. But the teacher was absolutely appalled, and he came upon it. It was a guy, and he came upon it, and he stopped it right away. But this was a younger child she was talking to, a 5th or 6th grader. And so that just totally, and so I guess one of the things I have to ask, or to put into the thought process, nobody has to come up with an answer right now. Are we willing, and is it a good idea for us to stay, if we're talking about progression, to stay with a year-round program at this point, because we simply don't know. We simply don't know what's going to be going on. So those are some of the things I'm thinking of. The other thing is our teaching staff is shrinking. And when you change, like one of the things when Larry Watkins and whatever the guy's name was, we're talking about putting the middle school kids in with the elementary kids, they had all this big plan and everything. And I said to them, well, what about certifications? And they hadn't even thought about that. So we lost some good teachers in that, but how about certifications? We don't maybe have enough. If Spit and Paste, not $4 million, would hold Northwestern together, if we could find out that Casey, you got to work your magic. If there was something we could find out that we can do, we could say, okay, we are going to hold you here for now. This is what the long-term plan is. And anything that was being built would be in the North End, that it would be something like that. But I just think the more ideas we have out there, the more things we can check on or off, that at least when we know more, we then can start moving in that direction. We're not going to have all the answers now, but can we have some priorities? Stability is a priority. Teacher certification, strong principal, that's a priority. Busing, that will be a priority. We don't even know how many kids we're going to get back. We don't even know how many kids we're going to get back yet. We don't know if push came to shove, would we have to put the middle school kids back in with the high school kids if push came to shove, at least for a while. So to say anything is an absolute right now, but the more information and thoughts we have out there, then at least they'll be going through our heads. Okay, that's where I'm coming from.
Thank you. Mr. Strozier.
Yes, ma'am. Just I've heard the conversation. I actually like the phasing in component a little bit better. Mr. Stewart, just a quick question. I did a little digging. The MDE, the MDE partnership, if we were to, isn't part of the discussion dialogue with the agreement that all of our schools would be K through 6 and that we would not return 7th and 8th graders into the building? And that
So there are a lot of assumptions that are out there with MDE, not just MDE, but just around the county and around the state. One assumption is we will be virtual all 2021. Our kids will not go back to school. That's one assumption that's out there. One assumption that is out there is there will be a blended learning for 2021, which could be that we'll start off face-to-face and then we'll end up going virtual and then back face-to-face, or it could be the total opposite. We'll start off virtual, go face-to-face, and then go back virtual. That's one assumption out there. One assumption that is out there is that our babies could return to school face to face, and then our older kids could do the virtual learning. Another assumption that is out there is that we can have an A day, an A and B day, where on Monday, Tuesday, Anita will attend face-to-face instruction, and then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Anita will have classes that are virtual. Well, Mr. Strozier will start off with classes that are virtual Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but then he would have face-to-face classes on Thursday, Friday. That's what they're calling an A day, B day. That means half of your kids will be doing one thing, the other half will be doing something else. So those are all of the assumptions that are out there right now, and that the instructional team, we're planning for all of those assumptions so that when the governor makes her announcement, because we tentatively start school the first week of August, and that is one of the top 10 items on MDE's list is the balanced calendar. So they are thinking about those schools who start in August, but just in case the governor makes her announcement the last minute, or she makes her announcement in July, we will have plans in place for all of those options so that we can pivot in the direction that we need to, if so she makes a decision, say in July. We already have plans in place for all of those options.
Okay. Now, with the MDE partnership agreement that we have, would 7th and 8th graders, if they were to go back to elementary school, would that be a violation of the partnership agreement that we have with them, though?
If they go back to the elementary school?
Correct. Like under the arrangement that I suggested earlier, would that be a penalty if we were to send them back to the elementary schools, or violation of MDE?
I don't think so, but I think Ms. Polly is on the line. She can check into that for us. But I do not think that that would be a violation. But once again, we can check into it and we can see for you. I just know that according to our partnership agreement, we are scheduled to make progress in certain areas. I don't know if putting our middle school students back in the elementary building, if that causes any penalty or anything, but I will have Ms. Polly to look into that.
Okay. And then my last comment is, I agree with everything that the board members have. I mean, it's been good dialogue. None of us actually anticipate us being in this position on June 9th. And honestly, I think back to the meeting that we had, the meetings that we had, plural, with our community members, and just the amount of intensity and the amount of enthusiasm that they came about their certain buildings that they want to maintain. We have a lot of history in this community, a lot of value for our system. I just feel that I don't want to sound so negative, but I just feel that we need, at this point, we're sounding so gloom and such as if we have no hope, that at some point we have to be able to give our residents and our community members some type of hope that this may be bad right now, but we are preparing for a better Flint, a better
Absolutely.
FCS, a better program, better facilities, We've closed buildings. I think we've closed almost, Ms. Perry, back me up. I think we've closed almost 25 buildings from 2002 till today. And every time we close, we gave them, it's going to get better. It's going to get better. We're going to do this. And in some cases, it's never gotten any better. We've just continued to close buildings. So if we do go down the road of closure, we have to get on with our marketing team. We have to do something that's going to promote that we're preparing for a better Flint. And
Absolutely.
I think when I said the 4 elementaries, and I know in those conversations with our foundations, their discussions were built on they'd rather support us one time rather than continuously through the years. So, those conversations of one big package deal for us to advance our project and our product here in Flint, rather than little bits and pieces here and there, I think that would give a lot of support to the community, saying that, okay, they'll close this building. That's why I said this is the phasing program. If we phase in over time with the intent that in the end, our result will be to be in these buildings here, I think that would be a lot more palatable for people to grasp rather than just saying, we're closing this building and we're moving here. Because people have a way of voicing their frustration with us by just going and upping and going across the Hamlet. Let's just be honest. Or going to Beecher, or going to Carmen Ainsworth. So,
That's right.
The way for us to do this is to work with our community. And as much as I love the north side of Flint, as much as I have family, spend most of my time north side, because even though I live on the west side, my house is technically on the north side. I have kids to go to north side schools. I know for a fact that we have to start building for the future in Flint. And in some cases, our facilities right now don't even come close to where they could be and should be. So I think if we phase in this over time, I agree with Mrs. Wright. I think it would be better, it would be a bigger draw for our community to kind of get behind. But if we phase it in, we have to do something that's going to give people a picture. I remember when we had the picture of the new high school up, and people kept saying, this is what we're going to. There was excitement in Flint that, okay, this is where we're going. I know that we have what we have now, but that's the plan. And as long as we can present people in our community with a plan of where we're going, phasing in, saying, okay, 8th grade, this will be the last year for 8th grade. The 7th grade will be the 8th graders, and then we're going to go to a new system next year. If we start that now and say, okay, in 2 years, our plan is to have a middle school constructed in the center of the city with a new high school, or either to have some facility that's going to be able to hold them, and everyone else will just trickle into the elementary schools for the time being. I think that phasing process will work better than just saying we're moving everybody to a site and then in 3 years we'll move them again. It's that process of moving, and the more we move people, the more they leave.
Good.
And so, I agree we need to do something, but it's the constant moving, the instability.
Mr. Strozier, you went
out. It's the instability, the fact that even in times such as these, when we look at some of our families, the only thing that has been consistent to some people is the teacher that they have or the school building that they've gone to. And in our case in Flint, when you have students that have started off at Gundry, left Gundry, went to this school, left that school, went to this school, it's been instability that has caused many of the times for parents to look at other districts, because at least they can say they'll start at school A, they'll end at school A, they'll finish at school B, they'll end at school B. And so I just think we need to have a more consistency with our processes, that if it's phasing that works better for our community, but we have to give the district and we have to give the parents and the people of this community something to say, this is going to be our long-term plan. And
I agree. Mrs. Wright.
I think I didn't write down what I was going to say, so I don't have it right now.
Okay. I can't see anyone else's hand, so did someone else have something that they wanted to say?
Yeah, I just want to say, yes, I do. I fight hard for the north side because I have young people over here with nothing to do,
Mhm.
who are all over the place. It was nice to be able to walk from your house to school. You know, we have to offer our kids something in their community if we're going to be Flint community schools. You can't call yourself a community school and I got to go cross town to get my education. Plus, with the fact that we have a pandemic going on now, um, regardless, we need to plan for smaller class sizes. The day of cramping everybody on top of each other, that's over. If I had to make a decision, and furthermore, it doesn't matter if your building, it's just like a house. If you buy an old house and you gut that house and put all new stuff in there and it's nice and it's modern on the inside and people step in and it's nice, they might not know on the outside how nice your house is, but you live good and you very comfortable, probably more comfortable than them. You can take something old and make it nice. Our problem is we lack focus. We never complete anything. We're all over the place. And how can we offer students any stability or any direction when we unstable as a board in a district? I understand that it's costly. Everything we do is costly. Every time we talk about the expenditures for our students over here, it's like, which way do we go? Yes, I'm all for the phase thing. We can do it in phases. If we leave our students there this year, and phase them out, that means that's time we could have been working on our building. No matter what, whether the students stay at Northwestern or leave, I think we should continue to invest in Northwestern. I think we need to renovate some of our other buildings that we have, all our buildings with our students in. I think we should constantly work on upgrading them. I think we should constantly be looking at our roof and our plumbing and our wiring and our parking lots. Like I said, when we were doing Scott, before you go in there and put new carpet and light fixtures, what good is that if somebody's grandmother gets out the car taking them to school and break her leg because you got 1,000 potholes in the parking lot? I mean, we got to make it make sense. We have nothing attractive. We have no attractive facilities really. And I think that is what is hurting us. You can close all the schools you want. You're not gonna, I'm gonna say it again. You're not gonna make people bring their kids to your junk. I don't care what you come up with. When Grand Blanc is finna get a whole new, did y'all see that new school Grand Blanc finna get? Have y'all heard about that? I see, and you see that new school that's right over there on our old land? Now,
I'm actually designing that building, so please be careful how you talk about it.
I know I don't have anything to say about it, only nice stuff. My point is, if I'm looking at them buildings and I'm looking at our buildings, even if our building wasn't attractive on the outside, when I go in there, if we had nice stuff, maybe I'd stay. But when we got a bunch of junk on the inside and the outside, and all these nice schools and buildings are going up, I'm abandoning you. I am not putting my kids at your mercy to make you feel like you're relevant as a school district. Now, we cannot fix our buildings and keep pretending like we don't have these issues and keep closing until we have one building. It don't matter. At the end of the day, if we don't fix our buildings, we are going to have 0 students because other districts are renovating, are innovative, are bringing new nice stuff to their students, and they coming to get some of yours. So you can take it how you want. You can put the big kids with the little kids with their little hormones raging, letting them fill the babies up, okay? And all this kind of stuff. You can subject your kids, your younger students, to older students with little predators and perverts, and that's some more issues for it. Do it how you want. But I think everybody on here, as a parent, an aunt, an uncle, grandparents, know that you need the little kids with the little kids. They need stability. They need something nice. They need to know that next year they're going to miss so-and-so's class. They need to have a relationship with her. They need to know what junior high they're going to. When you don't have anything to, when you can't tell me nothing about next year, I'm going to make my own plan. I'm not leaving my students' future in your hands when every year all you can come up with is to close buildings. I'm done with it. I'm done. Because we gotta take our dollars and squeeze them hard. And like I said, whether it's Northwestern, whether it's Holmes, wherever we take our students, all of our buildings need major overhauls, okay? You ain't got, like, now we put money into DTM. Now we need a roof over there, and the new stuff is finna be messed up because we got an ancient roof with all this nice stuff on the end. See, this is the type of decisions we constantly make. 2 years ago, when Mr. Harold Woodson was on this board, I told y'all, but every time I say something, it's a lot of resistance. But I'm not fighting this hard just because I like to fight. I'm fighting this hard because I can't believe this board can't receive basic information when I bring it to you. Roofing, plumbing, electrical, your parking lots, that your heating and cooling is going to hurt you every time. If you don't have those basic structural things together, you don't have anything. I don't care about your painting your carpet. If the toilets don't flush and the roof is leaking, foot on your carpet, foot on your little lights and stuff. That's all I got to say. So when we ready to get our minds wrapped around the fact that we have to be responsible for these structures that we call our schools, until we accept the fact that we are going to have to not play games and really be responsible and quit thinking you can just put fresh new paint up on junk, we will continue to lose students. I promise you that. Y'all can put that in the back of your Bible. It's just as good as the gospel. I'm done. I'm just done with it.
Casey, I'm going to turn this back over to, I'm sorry, Board President Lester, I'm going to turn this back over to you. Please forgive me.
Okay, I think we all have some stuff to think about, some things to look at in preparation for the upcoming decisions. So let's, kind of try to wrap our heads around everything and do what we can to come together for a better decision and what we can do for a stronger Flint moving forward. So that being said, seeing no further action, I declare the special board meeting workshop adjourned. Good night, everybody, and I will see you tomorrow.
Good night.